Welcome to Porchlight Letters podcast number 2364. Our topic today is why do wars and migration affect family memory? Now, you might have to excuse me a little bit. I've just had my lawns cut. They haven't been cut in 6 weeks, which was basically when I viewed the property. And I opened up all the windows a little too soon, I think, and it's been catching me in the throat. So hopefully the voice stays, but we'll see how we go. Anyway, so today we are talking about how do wars and migration affect family memory. Movement reshapes memory. So when you have movements, there are things that people are going to leave behind emotionally, or try to do that as well. And so they're going to, and sometimes when they do that, it leaves a piece of their memories back there as well, and they don't take them forward. Wars separated families and destroyed records. It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter when the war was. If you're looking at some of the world wars and the ones that, the Vietnam, Korea, what else has there been? The Gulf Wars, all of the wars that have been over time, just during your lifetime, and even the ones in history. Oh, it's 3 o'clock now. My phone, I've got a clock that dings when it's 3 o'clock, when it's the top of the hour. There are records that were destroyed. So those are records we're never going to get again unless somebody in the family who survived that era and managed to get some of their belongings have taken records with them. There are some records that I have that are from Lithuania, the Ukraine, and Russia, for my husband's side of the family, that the copies that I have may be the only existing copies. We don't know. So I want to make sure that those copies get to a place where they can be categorized and preserved. And even though they are copies, because we don't know if the original records have survived or not. And so families were separated and records were destroyed. Government buildings were destroyed that held these records and things in them. So that has created, has had a lot of effect on family memory. And you might say, yeah, I get it. But some people have to have documents to look up. Like family Bibles. There may have been family Bibles that had all of the history of that family recorded in that family Bible, but it got destroyed in war. Now all of the memories associated with that Bible are gone because people, when they see the name, it might be triggered to tell you a story about them. Some of the times documents and family and personal family records are used to trigger memories. And when they get destroyed for whatever reason, be it because they were moving, there's stuff they could take with them, stuff they couldn't take with them. They had to prioritize what they could take. But especially with wars, when you've got families being separated and having to flee where they lived and they come home to find their homes being completely destroyed or ransacked, and the records are now gone. Government buildings where they were holding the records are now gone. So there's a lot of records that have been lost over time due to families being separated and war records. Migration forced reinvention and a loss of continuity. So when people migrated from one part of the world to another part of the world, they were limited in what they could take with them. So they had to prioritize, what do we really want to take with us? There were times when stuff was lost overboard on the ships. There were times they got to the new country and they may have been robbed when they got to the new country. Who knows? There's a lot of different stories out there. But when they get to a new country, it's now all different routines and everything else. There's that loss of continuity from what they used to do back home. And now they're in a new life, in a new world. They may have to hide who they are because the reason that they left could have been because of religious persecution, political persecution, anything. There could have been, and then again, the families don't want to talk about some of the times that they had before they fled the country to go to the new world, to go to a different part of the world and start over again. Some of them had to flee, and some of the migration, forced reinvention and loss of continuity because they had to flee. They had no options. They had to flee or be killed or be captured. And goodness knows what would happen when they were captured. So we have to look at, computer needs a plug. So we have to look at that sort of thing too. Why did they flee? Why did they come over? And they would have been limited in what they could have actually brought with them as well, and the size of their luggage and things. Trust me, I know. Stories were shortened to survive the new places. Some people in the new places didn't want to hear the big woes and the big stories. They just wanted it short and concise. Why'd you come over? Religious persecution. Done. End of story. Literally, that's what some people have had to say when they're talking about their stories. Some may go into a little more detail, but it won't be the depth of the story that they wanted to share, because they were worried that some portions of it may get back or may get passed on to the wrong people, especially if they were hiding, if they were fleeing in order to hide. They had to be very careful. Some people had to be very careful, because some people just fled to avoid persecution of some sort. It could have been to avoid criminal charges. It could have been to avoid the fact that they may have been involved in an incident where somebody died, and they've been blamed by that family. So the family's now after. There's all sorts of stories out there. There is a lot of them out there. And so they are fleeing to avoid any of the family getting them. So when they get here, their stories are shortened and very brief, because if they go into too much, they don't know who to trust. If they go into too much detail, they could be discovered. And who knows what would happen then. So some of the stories were shortened just so they could survive. They didn't know who they could trust, and they didn't know if somebody was a plant from the family that was looking for them, or for the law that, for the judicial system, the police to catch up with them and that sort of thing. Yes, there were stories like that out there. Language and culture shifts erased details. They got lost in literally got lost in translation. Yes, some families kept their language, and it has been passed down through generations. It's the same with the culture, but some of it was shifted so it better fitted the society that they were now in. And some details got erased because of that. Some families managed to keep it all together, and some families did not. And then only fragments were carried forward. This goes back to that trust thing. Who do we trust to tell our story to? Because we don't want it getting to the wrong people. They may have been in the country illegally. So they don't want to get found out. So they're very careful about the story that they tell. They only give you a little piece here, and a little piece here. Very, very careful. I tell you, wars tore the families apart. Religious persecution, again, separated families because they had to escape to get to where they were going. And this all matters because displacement alters how families remember and what they forgot. Some of them, it could have been a very traumatic time during the leading up to the fleeing, and then and so they don't want to remember that. They don't want to talk about it. It's like when we're talking about the people who have been in wars, who fought in wars. They went through some trauma that they don't want to remember. They don't want to talk about it. They'd rather forget about it, and that affects them as well. So when you are so your practical takeaways when you're looking at migration and war, look at it as context, not interruptions. So look at it in the context that it was. Why did they migrate? What war were they involved in? Where were they located when the war broke out, when the war came into the area? You can look at old maps. You can go visit these towns and find the history and talk to the history about these people and say, well, we know that they lived in there. Oh, yeah, well, that was destroyed during the war. Now you've got a reference that's why they had no documents, or they may have fled with their documents. The documents that I got from my mother-in-law that were from Lithuania, Russia, and the Ukraine were brought to this country by my husband's family when they immigrated to the US in the early 1900s. They brought that information with them. What happened to the originals? We don't know. Some of them, actually, I think a couple of them are originals, but they are all in whichever language they were talking whichever language they were written at the time. And thankfully, there's also translations to go with each of those certificates, so we know what each certificate is about. There are a couple in there that I'm sort of like, yeah, we're going to have to get those translated. But, look for those things. If you want help tracing migration stories, send us a private message, and we can set up a time to have a talk with you about that. And in closing today, what was left behind still shaped what came next. I'll let you think on that one. And with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific.